Fresh controversy. We've seen that touches on what some would say is the very fiber of our social fabric, and that's surrounding Kenyan film Rafiki, which had been banned by the Kenya Film Classification Board for having what they termed, quote, a homosexual theme and clear intent to promote lesbianism in Kenya, contrary to the law, end quote. But the court since lifted that ban, and the film is being screened for the period of 1 week in by a section, I should say, of local theatres. And joining us now is the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board, to my immediate left, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua. Welcome to the program. And next to him is Dr. George Evans Owino, who's a lecturer at the Department of Sociology at the Kenyatta University. And you're both welcome to the show. Dr. Mutua, let's start here. You had threatened on your social media page theatres not to screen this film without the express authority of the board. Now that we are seeing it run in a section of theatres, does that mean that those theatres have had some kind of written approval from yourselves?
Okay, first of all, let me correct a lot of misinformation. First, the ban was lifted for 7 days.
We
a
have
period
said
of 7 days. No, it's not. It sounded like an open ban. It's a period of 7 days from Friday.
I expressly said 7 days.
Yeah, nevertheless, 7 days. Let me clarify. The suspension will lapse after 7 days, and in any case, not later than 30th of September. And during this period, the movie can be screened. Remember, the matter is still in court, so we can't comment further or more about it.
But you can comment on what you have already said publicly, which is on your social media
I want to put it in context. Give me time. So this is the context, that the matter is in court. We banned the movie, okay? That was about 4 or 5 months ago. About 3-4 weeks ago, the producer went to court, and they wanted to be allowed to screen for purposes of fulfilling the requirement to be allowed to submit it for the Oscars. And therefore, this is the consideration the judge made at this point on prima facie ground. It's not an open ban. Once the 7 days are over, it will go back. The ban resumes. And
I appreciate you restating that, not that we hadn't stated it, but if you would answer my question now that it is, in fact, screening in a section of local
We were
theaters.
there yesterday. We were at Prestige.
You gave
and
your
we
approval.
ensured that only adults, the court orders were followed strictly.
Okay.
They even, and to prove that the audience was adult, and that was by way of IDs, and then publicized that,
Fair enough.
which was fitting this. And as it started, they clearly showed that it has been rated suitable for over 18.
Okay. You have been accused of being hypocritical in this matter. First, praising the work of this Kenyan film in the first instance, and then turning around. This is what you said on Hot 96 a few months ago.
Kenyan story.
What is
a
it about?
Kenyan producer. Well, it's a very deep-seated story. I don't know whether I want to discuss it here. She didn't permit me.
Okay.
But it's a story about the realities of our time and the challenges that our kids are facing, especially with their sexuality and the issues of homosexuality. It's a story put in context that speaks about our reality and the challenges our kids are facing, and we are trying to sweep it under the carpet and make it look like it's not happening, or we react with shock and consternation, and we forget it's actually a reality. The issue is, how do you put that in the light of our moral values and what you call the dominant values of the Kenyan society? But I think Wanuri has a great story. We are working on the legal issues and the classification aspect, but she has a big story. It's a great story.
And it's
Rafiki.
been nominated at Cannes.
That's been nominated. You'll be hearing a lot about it. We're just handling the aspect of a classification so that we don't end up, having a situation where it is nominated and you're not celebrating it here. We want it to be our movie. We want it to be our story. And we are just handling the aspect of classification.
So at that point, you were saying you were celebrating it, save for the few issues that were legal in terms of its classification. But pretty much you're saying it's a good movie. We want it to be our story. Fast forward to just in the past week or so, where you have said that this movie categorically is not the Kenyan story, and that Kenyans should not want to be known out there for lesbianism, etc. What changed so dramatically in terms of your feelings about the film that one who perhaps listened to you then on Hot 96 would have expected quite, you know, collegial, if you like, dealing of the matter to what we are seeing now, which some say has been extreme on your part?
First of all, there is no contradiction. That clip is self-explanatory. I'm very clear. And that still remains the position. Okay?
That it's a good film?
Yeah, and nobody has...
and that it represents
about hypocrisy,
Kenyan
actually,
society?
Look, let me place the hypocrisy where it belongs. It belongs to the media and belongs to the producer. I said very clearly, and that was the morning after having a meeting with the producer the previous afternoon, where we agreed she had to delete, as required by the law, portions that glamorizes or glorifies homosexuality. I have had conversation with the key characters. Jimmy Gadhu is a main player there. In the character, Jimmy is the father of one of the lesbian girls. He's running for a political seat, and because of the stigmatization and the hostility of the society, he has to pull out of the race. That's a huge story. That's what I'm talking about. The story in context, and that clip is very clear. Context is very important, and the context is homosexuality is a reality. But so is drugs, so is terrorism, so is robbery, so it's all the manner of things that you're watching on TV. And it's not funny to see the kind of murder of our young girls that is being committed and the kind of crimes that are going on in this country. Those are our stories.
You had an agreement with the producer that that portion of the film would have been deleted?
Absolutely, and it's not the first one.
And you're saying she reneged on that?
It's not the first one we have deleted. So the following morning, I was here. We had a very good agreement. I was not alone. We were the entire room, and we had an agreement. And she asked for a week to go and do what the board required according to the law. She asked for another 1 week later after I came from this studio. We extended by a week, only for her to call us when we are out of town to say 2 days to the Cannes trip to say that I'm not changing anything, go by the original script. And in our view, she knew what she was going to get, which was a ban, because even when she came to offices and we went through the guidelines, we realized she had actually altered the script without submitting it for approval by the board, which is another crime altogether. So there were so many things put together. So for her to come last minute, even after we had been so lenient with her, because of the sensitivity of that story, because on the one hand, it's a reality, and I'm saying so is everything, abortion, terrorism, crime. It happens. It's a reality. It's our story. The girls who go to Koinange, that's our story. So there's nothing special and hypocritical about saying it's the story of Kenya.
And having said that, it is part of our story, like the other social ills that you have mentioned. Many have argued online that just because you go to a theater and you see any one of the things that you have mentioned, crime, murder, use of drugs, etc., does not mean necessarily that the viewer will then change and become a drug user, a murderer, etc. Why would you then have that standard, if you like, in response
and
to
it's not me, it's the law and it's the board.
There you are. Fair enough.
The point is, the portion of that script, the movie that we agreed that would be deleted, is the one that gives the glamorization or normalization of lesbianism as a reality or as a way of life. And like I've said, you can do movies about murder, about robbery, about terrorism.
Many of which are still glamorized.
You don't do that.
But they are. That's the reality. For instance, people have argued that, you can access, if you like, on-demand movies here in Kenya, the Netflix,
That's a different story. That's a different story.
Different?
Look, for public theaters, for free-to-air radio and TV, the regulation is different from pay-to-view. Because when it comes to pay-to-view, you've taken another responsibility as a parent to to provide an iPhone for your kids, to provide the internet, to buy them computers. So we expect that you would have taken a caveat, at least put a caveat for them. But free to air and public theaters or public exhibition is regulated by the board in line with the law. So that's a different story. You're bringing two arguments that don't go hand in hand. And this is not a case of Kenya. I would want to remind you that in the US, the Janet Jackson indecent exposure was taken so badly by the Federal Communications Commission that they nearly closed the CBS just because of fraction of seconds indecent exposure, or what is popular now known as wardrobe malfunctioning. Every country has its own values. Right. So public theaters are different. Those ones are regulated differently. You don't admit kids, you don't allow certain content, and you don't glamorize crime.
Finally, just before I open it up to the other doctor, part of what the court said in granting permission for this to be filmed for that restricted period is that, you know, Kenya's moral fiber is strong, our society is strong, and that it is not conceivable, at least to the court, that, you know, the screening of one film, which is not a mandatory, you know, thing to watch, would result in a breakdown of our moral values. What is your response to that?
Certainly, yes. And to that extent, that is a valid point. And I don't want to comment on the ruling, on the orders, because that matter is still in court. Suffice it to say that we have obeyed the court orders. After 30th, the ban resumes, and we are going to prosecute this matter vigorously to the end, even if it will take to the Supreme Court. Look, this is a temporary reprieve to satisfy. By the way, there are so many other movies that have been nominated for the Oscars. It is not mandatory that it becomes this one. And our argument was, and we agree with the judge, our morals are not, I mean, people are queuing there to watch yesterday. I don't think anybody died or became an homosexual because they watched the movie. That's not the point. The point is about the law and regulation. Okay. And why we do it. And I can tell you, it's a matter that we are not likely to allow to happen until it is canvassed to the highest court. And we are hoping that once the ban resumes, we will have an opportunity to argue our case. Okay. The comments by the judge are valid. The orders are valid. The prima facie grounds on which this was granted are valid. And in our view, there is nothing to object at this point. We have obeyed the court orders fully. We have allowed the film to show. Anyone who wants to go, provided they are willing adults. There are no kids who are admitted to those theaters, because if those theaters were going to allow children and we have police who are monitoring, we're going to take action on them.
Since you brought the issue of the law, let me just bring you in, Dr. Owino. Yeah. I think there appears to be maybe some strain within our own legal regime, to the extent that we have a new, well, not a new constitution anymore, but we have the current constitution, whose Bill of Rights is so robust. And the imagination is really, you know, the expansion or the full expression of our freedoms on the one hand. And then you have laws and regulations such as those that the Film Board is operating on, that some say are old, archaic, colonial, and not in the true spirit of the Constitution. Do you find a dissonance of some kind, and does it speak of where our society is right now, like we said 2 weeks ago, at the crossroads between being, you know, completely permissive on the one hand and holding on the other to more traditional values?
For me, I would say that the most important thing for society is the maintenance of social order. And one of the most important tools or formal means of social control to help us maintain social order is the law. It's the best that we have. Of course, there are others, other informal means like the family, religion, education, but the strongest is the law. Well, we could argue that if you let society, if people have to experience their rights, to what extent are their rights infringing on the rights of others? I think what the Film Board is doing is to protect those children who are still not beyond 18. In other words, they're not able to make a choice. They are not, we can't say that they're adults to choose what kind of things to watch. And therefore, the control of what is to be viewed or by the media has to be that which conforms to the rights even of these young children who still really don't have the right to choose. Again, family for us is one of the basic units of society. And if anything will come up that breaks the structure of the family, if you break the family, you'll break the nation, because that's where the nation gets its new people to replace those who are dying and those who are living.
And whilst that may be a fair argument, some have opined that, you know, as with many of these issues, they don't want to be morally policed, that they're adults, right-thinking adults, and can make certain determinations for themselves, including what to watch and what not to watch, and that should not, or let me even go further, others would argue even their sexuality, that is not a matter to be policed by the state or the government. How do you respond to that?
I would say that as a society, we also have certain moral values that we've agreed on, the moral consensus as it is now before it changes. What we have now, which is also enshrined in the Constitution, for instance, with issues of sexuality, marriage is between people of the opposite sex, consenting adults. And therefore, even though I also agree that people should enjoy their rights, whatever rights they want, they should watch what they want, eat what they want, dress how they want. However, we must think about those who still don't have the capacity to decide what is right for them, the children. But also, again, the issue of maintaining social order, letting society not go into anarchy. The state has certain minimum obligation to ensure that our moral values, as they are yet, as at now described, are protected. Yeah, and
there are those who, you know, you've talked about protecting, of course, if you should say the most vulnerable amongst us, yes, children and the like. But at the same time, there are those who feel that this is sweeping real issues under the carpet, that it is preferable to have an open and candid conversation than to sort of, you know, walk with our heads in the sand, that these things are happening, and that even those minors that we're talking about, protecting them, for instance, in the case of public theatres, etc., have access to devices. They have access to the internet, to Wi-Fi. They see, if you were to call this bad, if you were to call it that, then they see 100 times worse.
Exactly.
On WhatsApp.
Can I make a distinction before Dr. even responds? Because public space and private space is very different. The work of the government and anywhere in the world is to do three things. Is to protect people's lives, property, and values. There is no government anywhere in the world. Go to the UK and demonize the Queen and see whether you'll do a movie there. Go to the United Arab Emirates and see whether you can challenge the rulership of the Emirates and whether you last a day there. Why do you want to have a catch of anything goes in this country? Is it any wonder that we are seeing our girls being murdered the way they're being murdered in the name of freedom? You don't eat freedom. Go to Dubai and see the level of infrastructural development. And yet they put strict rules on what they consider to their moral values. I've just given you an example of the Queen who has ruled for a long time. You don't go there and say, well, we are free, we don't have to obey the Queen. You don't do that.
The former Chief Justice responds to you in one of the tweets and says, you know, in that protection of society, there needs to be a recognition that society is not homogeneous, meaning that not everybody shares, you know, the same mores or values, etc. How do you respond to that?
I thought that requires no debate. You don't need to be a genius to say that. So there's nothing new in what he said. What I'm saying is the government exists to protect your life, protect your property, and protect moral values. How do we do that? I think Dr. put it very well. In the context of our norms and our values. We are not a society without values. I think the moment we go there, that catch of anything goes is what breeds corruption, crime, and anarchy.
The people who say that you have only served to make this film that much more popular with this hullabaloo, that were it not for the ban, were it not for the attacks on social media, some would say, you wouldn't have had, you know, double the capacity there to watch it in the first place, and that your tactics in that respect are counterproductive.
What capacity? Let me tell you. That theater has a capacity of 280. Fully, not more than 300. We are 44+ million people. So, under the constituency, the kind of audience that went to watch, they are the people who would have watched it anyway. Just the same way people can watch pornography, which is illegal in Kenya. They can do drugs, which are illegal in Kenya. It's not about popularizing. If you're popularizing it by telling the same group, the same audience that would have watched anyway, there's no popularity in that. Look at the ratings. If they went to the Prestige, and it has a capacity of 300. I'm protecting 44+ million people. And the thing is, Anne, Whether we popularize it or not, that's not our concern. Our concern is for the law to be followed. We must be a society that obeys the law. We must be a society that has a sense of right and wrong. And the moment you promote this culture of socialites and anything goes, this is what is leading to the situation where we are in. And the breakdown of our moral fabric will be so costly to reverse in the name of freedom. And I really pity people who think that there is glory in people demonizing government or insulting leaders when they take decisions. So let me answer you directly about popularizing a movie by banning it. We don't.
Okay, if you would just respond to my question again about and maybe speak to the tactics. There are those who say it is better to have a public, open conversation about what some may think are, you know, the wrong values, etc. Kids are going to access this. If it's about protecting children, they're accessing it anyway through other means. I mean, what is your response to that? And that the work of, you know, bodies like this is just not innovative, if you like, given the challenge. If it's really about protecting our values, our culture, our children, they're still getting it. There's still Wi-Fi. There's still WhatsApp and all of that.
What I can say is that we find ourselves at the crossroads of different heritages and traditions. In Kenya, we are Christians, we are Africans, but also the secular opinion is also very strong and very heavy.
No, maybe not just Christians, but there's a wide variety.
Yeah, other Christians, other faiths,
right.
Yeah, Muslims.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that correction.
Right.
And each of these traditions have got a culture, have a value. And so how do we reconcile all these kind of values? I am at once a Christian, an African, and also living in a secular society. It's very difficult. Parents of young children have difficulty even controlling what they have to watch. Parents have to be away from home, in school and what have you. And so media and other public spaces can help. So the regulatory agencies should help by doing their part, doing the regulation. So at least we can retain a modicum of values of social order. Yeah. Okay.
Final question to you, Dr. Mutua, in a minute. Should Rafiki win at the Oscars, would you be celebrating?
Well, it has not even been nominated. Sorry about that. It has not been nominated. Well, if it's nominated and it wins, it's their win. Let me tell you, there is in Kenya no market for homosexual movies.
So you won't be celebrating, I guess.
I would celebrate a movie. I would celebrate Lupita Nyong'o. I would celebrate Supermondo. I would celebrate.
She's celebrating this movie. She's actually tweeted about it in support. She had quite a scene in 12 Years as a Slave.
Yeah, but she didn't become famous because of a lesbian movie. So I'm looking at the market whether there's even value for money in doing an homosexual movie that is watched by 300 people out of 44 million or 44 plus.
Well, I thank you for your time, and I thank you both for your views, and that's our time.